Mike Masura, who is not here today. He texted me earlier that he would not be able to make it. And then we have Miss Tammy Smith as well. So moving ahead, first of all, we have agenda item number 1, Benton High School Stadium Improvements. This is a request of information from a board member, and I guess I will go ahead and turn that over to either Mr. Norwood or Mr. Babineau with their report.
Thank you, sir. It's actually Stacy Roger and Keith. It's Stacy Roger and Keith Norwood on this one. What we wanted to do was gather some information at Ms. Smith's request and bring it to the committee for consideration. And then, you know, depending on where you take this, then we can refer it back for additional information. So what we've done is we've gone out to Benton High Stadium and looked at 2 possible locations to add some student seating, one being the Tiger pad on the northeast corner there on the visitor side, the other being the south end zone. The south end zone would be similar to what's been done at Parkway for some student seating. We did get some preliminary budget pricing for bleachers to be installed, and I have the cost and capacity on those. We're pretty sure there'd be a requirement to add restrooms, which is feasible, but we don't have anything worked up on that yet until we get some direction. And also sidewalks probably and handicap ramps will be required. So if we get some direction from the committee tonight, we'll go back and work up some numbers on some alternatives for adding bleachers. But also you asked for a rundown on the other stadiums, which I have. This is based on some information that Mr. Babineau requested from principals and Mr. Roger put together. These are in round numbers, the approximate capacity of home and visitor for each of our 6 stadiums.
Real quick, it says 200 in the end zone of Bossier High School. Where's that coming from?
Well, that was from Mr. Scott, that they had some portable bleachers. When I looked at the aerial photograph of Bossier High School, the dimensions were exactly the same for the visitor side and the home side, and those were not shown. But I needed to reflect them somewhere in this spreadsheet, so I listed them as in the end zone as being extra. Those are the portable bleachers at Parkway as well, as I understand.
So we have more than, Mr. Scott, is that right? There's more than just the timer stand in that east end zone? Is that right? Okay, so it's not physically permanently located there. That's just portable as needed from the parish. Okay, so reflect that in that report, please. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Again, these are just round numbers. I only had the total count for airline, and Mr. Rowland pointed out that since they've added some seats on the bleachers, that decreased the overall capacity a little bit by a few seats because those are wider. But I just took the 10,000 and divided by 2 to get 5,000, 5,000. So it's just for comparative, you know, from stadium to stadium on what kind of seating we have for events.
Now, did you get on the Halton visitor side? I myself have been there. Is that functional seating or is that just measured seating where it says 1704? Because there's portions of that that's pretty much dilapidated and not usable, if I'm not mistaken.
That was measured 18-inch standard.
That was measured seating capacity, not actual?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And that's, I take it that's for all of those with Benton and Parkway and Plain Dealing as well?
I didn't do the Plain Dealing, that came from the school.
Okay.
But yes, the others were from our aerial measurements. That was actual divided by 18 inches.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now we know that although 18 inches is the regulatory butt width, that isn't in reality what actually happens at a stadium. The stadium capacity is going to be a little lower than that.
Please get versatile.
Could we remeasure?
So really we can get about 600 people.
So, yeah. Mr. Norwood, if you would, I saw you had some additional slides in there. Could we just cycle through those so the committee and everyone present can get a good visual of anything? What all do you have in there?
I thought I had photos of all the stadiums, and that somehow didn't make it onto my laptop. This is Benton High School, and the two locations that we measured, well, this is a concrete slab with the word Tigers painted on it. That's a potential bleacher pad. And the other option is to place them here in the south end zone, similar to what's going on at Parkway. I have a photo of that too, and it's on a PDF, so I have to switch.
So what would we be looking at if we were to, can we make any modifications without having to build restroom facilities?
We would have to analyze that. The life safety code, actually it's the health code, has changed since this stadium was built. We'd have to do a bleacher capacity takeoff and do a total restroom count. The good news is we have 3 sets of restrooms there, because I think we could count the baseball as being adjacent, plus home, plus visitor side. And there is room to add restrooms if it came to that under the building envelope that's there. So we wanted to get additional direction from you before we went to that extreme to start working up cost estimates.
Well, and I think the biggest concern of the committee and all the board members would be best use of our dollars. And we know that there's a need there. We want to make sure we get as much as we can for the least amount of financial exposure as possible. So,
yes, sir.
You know, if you could come back with that number to the committee as far as what can we do with what is currently there, and then if we go over that amount, what would that additional cost be as far as toilet count, sink count, things like that, so the committee can have a good understanding of what we could potentially be looking at.
Yes, sir.
And I'll be the first to say I mean, every one of our stadiums needs something just about. Airline was built a long time ago as a pair stadium. It's the biggest. It's been well kept. So, Mr. Rowland, good job on keeping that up if you're here. The other ones are just old, and the visitor sections are what they are. But if we can get some good information to look at that, you know, I think our home side everybody's pretty much at parity there, but the visitor side is lacking on a couple of them. So just bring us back options for that, I guess, and just start the conversation from there. Probably wouldn't hurt to bring estimates for what it costs to do this end zone here at Parkway. I don't know if Mr. Bates, Colonel, y'all actually, the school themselves purchased the bleachers in the south end zone at Parkway, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I went to Louisiana Tech. They took down 30,000, or I think that's how many seats they took down. They took parts, and we reassembled the parts over here.
And the school purchased that
The
itself?
school paid $11,000 for the seats. I think there are supposed to be about 22 new, and Stacy paid for, Stacy, you did all of the concrete work, handicap, things like that.
Okay, so utilizing the parish maintenance department and then the school funds to purchase those, is that correct?
The actual used seats, yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Newton.
We'll go Glenn first and then you, Ms. Smith.
Mr. Norwood, could you please go back to that slide showing the current facilities? Yeah, yes, sir, that's it. Why would you not come out to the side? Is it just for balance purposes? Yeah, right along in there. Would it not be appropriate to add, or would it be more cost effective?
Softball field.
It would infringe on that softball field? Okay, I'm sorry. And then,
You talking about on home or
Home
visitor
side?
side?
no, I'm talking on the home side.
Yeah, that's the left field foul pole for the softball field
Okay,
right there.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Secondly, it's my understanding there's also some significant parking needs. And is this being considered along with it? Because if you can seat more, they're going to require more parking. And are there any options that are being considered for that parking?
Yes, sir, that was discussed. Would one of y'all like to take that one? I wasn't directly involved in that.
Well, I'll just give a little history. I asked for this to be added to the agenda because I'm not sure if y'all are aware or not, but Benton is going from 4A to 5A this year. And we're hosting hosting Houghton. Airline and Parkway, okay. Airline and Parkway. And I don't know if y'all have been to a Benton High School football game, but parking is everywhere. We utilize all of the middle school space, all the high school space, all behind it, up and down Highway 3. They won't let us go on Rubicon Road because of the ambulances anymore, but all the way down Highway 3 where it becomes a hazard for people. So lighting is not good, and when I called Stacy about it, we talked about the baseball field that's located behind there needs to be demolished when the school is built because, Stacy, are you going to address that some? Just because of the condition of the stadium. And so before we went and spent dollars to do that, could it be best be utilized? Could we maintain some of the lighting? Could that be used as parking or whatever? And then to open up more seating available. So we did go and kind of look at the site to see what we could do, but that's why I asked, because the first game is September 24th.
We have our first home game is week 1, we play Parkway on September 27th.
27th, okay.
Yeah, we were just concerned with Parkway's band itself, so we want to be hospitable to everyone, we want to make sure we get everybody there, and that's sort of what concern going up. Playing 2 big Paris games, 5A this year, only having future games in Bird, Hall, Tree, team to track very well.
But Stacy had said that some maintenance was going to take care of some of that back there out of his budget, so go ahead, I'm sorry.
We did look at the baseball field. We had already had a plan to demo the portions of code violations in the baseball field, bleachers that are out of code, all those types of things. The light fixtures that have failed, we're trying to just go ahead and get some of that out of the way. So once you come across this plan, it made sense to fall in with that. We're going to take down fencing along the third baseline and create some access to that field and try and recreate kind of the Parkway scenario where we utilize the old baseball field as a parking area. We're going to keep a couple of those light standards and rework them to where they can work both the parking areas, the baseball field and the parking area behind it, but we're going to remove the rest of the lighting fixtures. I have a contractor at this time working me up a preliminary on rocking that area and the cost to that. I haven't had those numbers come in yet on that. We didn't do an official quote. We was just getting a preliminary number on those. So the idea of utilizing the baseball field makes sense because the area was not going to be utilized as it was. We were going to demo the portions of it anyway. And so
Is there any bleachers at the baseball stadium that can be reutilized?
not a one. They're all homemade. I say homemade, but they were built on site back in the 80s, completely out of spec, light poles coming up through the middle of them, that sort of thing. So we're going to demolish those so nobody gets hurt on them or tries to repurpose that area.
There's parking to the, I guess that'd be the northeast corner behind the Tigers slab. Do we have an aerial photo of
Try
that?
to bring one up.
Is that utilized, Ms. Howell, is that utilized during football games?
Yeah, the home on the visitor side it is, and half the time, the home spectators park there and walk up and come around to the front, come in.
Okay.
One of the football players park back there too, don't they? Also,
Question.
Mr. Bullard?
Thank you, sir. To follow up on something that Mr. Newman said, and maybe I've just misunderstood, but is there are there any safety concerns on regarding the bleachers on the visitor side?
Benton?
Of the football?
Benton, yeah.
No. Halton? Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that.
Ms. Brother?
Yeah, and I don't mean to sound ugly because I want Benton to have everything, but I also would like to, if we're going to do this to Benton's visitor side, I really want you to visit Houghton High School. We didn't get new things in new visitor side when we became 5A, and it's dangerous. Our bleachers over on that side, there's not even a place in the middle where you can walk up and there's a rail. There's not even an aisle. It's very dangerous. We have had it year before last year at a bird game, or right before the bird game, we had some of it collapse. the bleachers over on that side are the bleachers that were on the old football field when my husband played, and you know how old we are. So I'm just saying, if we're going to address their visitor side, I would like to see Houghton piggybacked in with that, looked at.
Well, be clear, we're just presenting information of
Right.
bleachers I didn't have a
Well,
funding source of this.
I know, but if we're going to fund it, I want Houghton to be considered along with that.
I was hoping that we could utilize part of the budget from what was left over at Benton, if there's something that's there, and not tear out any stadium, but just add more seating, so that's kind of.
Mr. Norwood, how up to date is this picture you're showing us right now?
It is from February, well, that's an older picture, excuse me.
We're missing a building and some more parking.
Yeah, here it
There
is.
we go.
This is a year ago.
So, Mr. Roget, you're saying that we could gray rock almost that entire baseball field and utilize it for parking?
I'm saying I'm getting pricing on Gray Rock. I have not funded Gray Rock. I just getting pricing.
In the meantime, fair weather parking.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna shut the the sprinkler system down and dry it out after the baseball season.
What is adjacent to the long skinny parking spots I see right there to the north of the baseball building? Is that the building you're going to leave or tear down? What's going to happen there?
That building is up for auction to be removed. The parking that you see with the cars outlining it is actually bigger than that now. And we made it bigger because they filled that parking lot.
So it goes all the way over to that service road, I guess? Is that right?
It goes more to the east up toward the rodeo arena, made it wider.
Okay.
There's probably still a little bit of area there that could be added to, but that was for student areas. We're shifting student parking around to the back to help relieve some of the parking issues up front. They were parking almost to the highway up front.
But once the new school's built, we won't need to address student parking per se at this campus.
Correct. Okay.
And that's why I had initially called, was to talk about the ring road that had a budget set for it. If we weren't going to have the safety there, you know, could some of those funds be utilized? And I know probably in the last, before January, it was maybe discussed what that could be utilized for. And they're 300 and something thousand. How much money was set aside for that ring road? No, 300 was what was left in the bin.
Let's, do we have an estimate on the auction price of that building by chance from the baseball? Mr. Roget?
Sorry, sir.
Do we have an estimate on the auction price that we think we're going to get for that building that you said set for auction?
They would like to receive their $10,000 to $12,000 that they have in it back.
They, the school, they, the baseball
The
program?
baseball club that paid for the building
Oh, so baseball's going to keep those funds
back into the school.
back to the school?
Yes.
Not dedicate them maybe to improvements there at the site?
When I say back to school, I'm just want to make sure legally it comes back to the school, but it's to be used for baseball athletics is what they're trying to recoup back to them.
Okay. All right. Mr. Backhouse?
Now, have I heard that there's going to be a ring road circling these schools?
It has been discussed in the bond issue. I don't know if there's been changes to it.
Yeah, Mr. Babineau, is that going to be part of your report here in a little while?
I haven't included that in the report, but I'll just give you, the last thing the board actually approved was a ring road at Benton High. That's the
Right.
currently approved project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, where's that
3.3
going to go?
million.
That's-
Is it going to be
I'll tell you
over
right
on the
now.
middle school there on the left?
Basically, if you follow my pen, goes around this way, comes all the way around to the back, and makes a loop and comes back up this way. All right, like a P shape. Back along the property, around the side, back of the gym, up to the edge of the field on the north end, and then back up this way. All right? That's the current path. That's only a preliminary design. It's
So they're
not been
not
taken
gonna
any further
use
than
the
that.
practice field any longer? That will be
I
inserted?
beg your pardon?
They're not gonna use that practice field to the north of the football field? Right there?
It's
Yeah, we're
be in
going
the middle
to ring
school
around the
in August.
perimeter of it as best we can. You're going to take a little bit of a corner off. It's just inevitable because of the sidewalk and where the track is over here. But it's going to just slim cut the corner just a tiny bit. Okay.
Okay,
But
thank
again,
you.
we're all at the preliminary stage. You haven't authorized us to proceed beyond that. That's the current proposed path.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think at this point, if, Mr. Roget, when you hear back from your gravel person on the gray rock, give that to Mr. Norwood. Mr. Norwood, if you would in turn, before the next committee meeting, go ahead and gather some information to come back to the committee. So the conversation's been started. If you would go ahead and start gathering some information so we'd have some actual numbers to start looking at and discussing further.
We'll get information on the paving, the restroom counts, the
What
parking
what we would be
situation.
looking at if we were to make any decisions to move forward. That, Ms. Smith?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the actual seating, is probably the higher priority than what the actual parking, if they're gonna add rock. I mean, we could try to just do fair weather type stuff with that. So I think before we add rock, if we have to choose and pick, actual seating, you can see that Benton has 1,000 less seats than any other school, basically, of that size, according to the schedule. And so, that's a concern about having to turn people away. Yeah, if you look there, Benton High on the visitor side is 1,344, and the next one closest to that, I guess, is Halton at 1,704, so 400.
Yeah, Mr. Norwood, in that report, if you and Mr. Roget or whoever, please go visit Halton High School and make a true assessment of that, about what's usable, both from a safety standpoint and an accessibility standpoint, because there is no aisle. If you're not a healthy adult or child, you really can't use that whole middle section beyond about the second row. So, like Ms. Brotherton said, we have a couple of areas that need to be addressed, so we're gonna look at one, let's look at both of them. So if y'all would make a good, true assessment, get with Mr. Cuvion and Coach Brotherton, and make that assessment as well, and report that back at the same time we bring this Benton information back to the committee, please.
Yes, sir.
Colonel? Yes, please.
Stacy, please correct me if I'm wrong. When we added those 268 seats in the south end zone at Parkway, we could only do that if we eliminated the substandard bleachers in the north end zone. Because of the code, we were locked into a code 1984, 1985. If we added more seats than that 268, I believe we were going to have to redo bathrooms and everything else. Am I correct or somewhat close? Okay. So if we start eliminating, if we have substandard seats, and I'm not saying we do at Halton, I would just be careful that, make sure that we're all code compliant.
Yeah, and that's the information we're wanting them to bring back to us. So, if we remove and replace, how much can we go up without having to add additional, toilets and things like that? And, if we go to Benton and start expanding, how far can we go? We don't want to have to build $1 million bathroom to put another 500 seats in.
I think if we work up 2 or 3 scenarios, you'll get a feel for the range of cost.
Everybody good? Everybody good? Everybody good? All right. Thank you. Item number 2, Halton Middle School, use of facilities, Embrace Church. Make sure I say this all right. Mr. Norwood.
Yes, sir. We have a request from a local church to use the cafeteria dining room, which we refer to as the commons area, at Halton Middle School. And Mr. Warren has been working with them, and he's endorsed their proposal, which they're starting off like every other Sunday, and then as you go through about mid-year, then they go to every Sunday, and they have a couple of other special events during the year. So it's a total of about 25 Sundays during the year. It's about 5 hours per use, and I worked up the fee structure for that for your consideration. It comes to about $400 per use. Mr. Warren asked for 1 extra hour of custodial beyond the minimum for cleanup after, so I put that in. But one thing we wanted to bring to your attention, I think it was about 3 years ago, we modified the facility use fee schedule to address this auditorium and library at Bick. And we may want to consider doing that, and let me bring that up for you. We may want to consider doing that for Halton Middle because they fall into the middle school category, but as you know, it's one of our largest schools in the entire parish. And so let me show you this. This is for nonprofits. The minimum fee is double for a for-profit, but for nonprofits, including churches and Boy Scouts, a cafeteria is $75 minimum use, whether it's elementary or high school. Likewise, we have a category for middle school gym, and really this building equates more to the size of a high school. So just for your consideration, you might could authorize Mr. Downey to do this administratively. I think that's the way it was done last time. Did that go through a committee, Dr. Bourgeois, do you remember? Just to add a line item for these types of facilities. The issues are the cost per square foot to operate. It costs more to run the utilities in a larger gym or cafeteria, so the idea is you need to raise the fee. And just looking at this, the list here, it would probably be more in scale with the Bick Library and a high school gymnasium beyond a certain capacity. So that would bring it up to, for Halton Middle, it would be $100 or more for using the dining room, commons, or to use the middle school gym, which is not a part of this proposal, but it could be the next one, to raise it from 100 to 150. That's not a lot per day, but it does add up over time. So that's just for your consideration. I added a second motion, but Mr. Warren is recommending that that we go with this use for his facility, and so that's the first recommendation. The second recommendation is if you'd like to consider referring this back to administrative decisions about the fee schedule.
I recommend that we use that, make a motion to approve the use of the cafeteria dining commons at Halton Middle by Embrace Church for 1 year.
I have a motion by Ms. Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Brotherton on the motion to approve the cafeteria dining commons. Committee, please vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Anybody for the alternate motion?
Do you want to take action on the second item?
I think we should.
Do we have any
I'd
discussion?
like to make that motion to authorize the assistant superintendent to add the appropriate line items for cafeteria commons and gymnasium exceeding a certain capacity.
I have a motion by Mr. Bullard,
Second.
second by Ms. Smith. Please vote. Motion passed. All
Thank you
right.
very much.
Okay. On to agenda item number 3, 2012 bond construction updates. Program Manager, SGB Yates, a joint venture, Mr. Clarence Babineau.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the new board members. First slide, Mr. Norwood. Thank you. One thing I'd like to do is just give everyone a synopsis. Those of you who knew, this is basically a global encapsulation of what's sort of going on overall with the bond program. Your whole bond issue is $210 million. You've sold to date $185. The bonds remain to be sold, $25 million. Your bond counsel has been monitoring economic conditions and can advise on the timing and the amount for future sales. I was talking to Mr. Rougeau last week, and he said the next assessed valuation will be in July. So it might be likely that you would have a bond sale, assuming everything else is in line, after that point, so you know exactly what the valuation of the properties are in the parish are. From the last bond sale, which was in June of last year, it was a $10 million sale. There's about $2.1 million currently available and budgeted for the last 4 projects, which are Benton Middle, Cope Middle, Houghton High, and Parkway High. And just to give you a little information too, roughly the construction inflation is running around 5%. So on the $25 million in bonds, your inflation is about $1.25 million per year. Just to kind of keep that in the back of your minds. All right. Any questions on this slide?
So just to make sure everybody's clear, current money, $2.1 million. We still have another $25 million to sell
Yes,
for a
sir.
total of $27.1 million left out of the entire bond proposal.
That is correct. And that's already dedicated for those last 4 projects up on the screen.
And did you say there was, okay, the bond council? Just wanted to make sure. Mr. Bullard?
27.1 million, but the estimate is the purchasing power of that 27.1 is going to reduce by 1.25 or 1.25 million per year going forward. So we have not 27.1, but we actually have 25.8, 25.9.
Keep in mind, we've got some contingencies built into those numbers, and that takes us a little ways down the road, a year or so, but after a while, it starts, you're right, it starts depleting your buying power.
We've been very fortunate. There's been virtually zero inflation, and our interest rates have been unprecedented.
Yeah.
And that is now changing. Probably the best indicator, we all sort of look at beef occasionally, and look what beef was generating 2 years ago, and look what it's going to generate this year. It's gone from pocket change, maybe 100,000 to over 1 million. So that interest rate's going up, and the inflation rate will correspond.
Mr. Bevan?
All right, next slide, please. Also, sources of funds. The projects on the first 5 lines, those are completed projects, and those are actual cash dollars remaining in those projects. That totals $317,000. Mr. Norwood's going to give you an update on some of the surplus real estate that was declared a while back. The projects listed below for Benton, Teal Roads, Houghton, and Kingston are all projects purchased with the 2012 bond dollars, and those are some values that he's provided for us. And so if you added those up, it's roughly between a little over 2 million to just under, $2 million to just under $2.5 million, if and when all those properties are sold combined with the cash. Now, I think, Mr. Norwood, you had some updates to that slide?
I had to add a separate item for that agenda because it's an action item, so
Okay.
I'll get to that later.
All right.
So we have 317 in cash. The remaining 2-point-something million is based on appraised value of property that is yet to be sold and closed on.
Right. Although Kingston Elementary, that sale is pending. That value actually might be slightly higher than that. In fact, I think it is, because the acreage went up by about half an acre, 6/10 of an acre. So it's probably maybe 825 or so. But yes, that's correct. Those are appraised values here. And then, as out of an abundance of caution, we're taking 80% of those, and that's where this range comes from. That's 80% to 100%.
And Mr. Norwood, you have an update for us on all of this?
Yes, sir,
later
it's
on?
in your packet.
Okay. Mr. Bember?
Am I dreaming, or do we still own some property on Cape Sligo Road? And is it,
We do. We have 3 future school sites. One of them is South Bossier on Cape Sligo next to South Bossier Park. One is on Parks Drive next to Turtle Creek subdivision. There's a sign up there. And the third is the property we purchased from the Jepsons, 4900 Benton Road, just north of Vanceville. And what the board agreed was to declare the frontage on that, the front half approximately surplus, and the property across Benton Road. So we've sold the small parcel that has the advertising sign on it. That's being cleared now, and they're putting something in there. We have the area kind of just south of Muddy Waters, and that shopping center is on the market here. That's included in, we kept the back half, which was large enough for a potential elementary school. So we have 3 potential elementary school sites at this time that are not listed here.
no, we don't have those for sale right now, though?
No, sir. No, that's for potential growth.
Thank you.
All right, next slide, please. All right, tornado shelter update. Some of you who've been on the board for a while may be familiar with this slide. We've given the information a few times before. In February of last year, the governor signed into law an updated version of the International Building Code. That code included a chapter to require schools and emergency response centers to include storm shelters in their construction. In our part of the state, storm shelter really means a tornado shelter. That's a building or part of a building capable of withstanding a 250-mile-an-hour wind equivalent of an F5 tornado. In the past, there have been some grants from FEMA to help offset those costs. There is a process, as you can imagine, with any sort of federal funding. It's a minimum 18 months. The grant is nationally competitive. Congress would normally appropriate certain dollars every year for those grants. The project has to be go through your local FEMA office or your Homeland Security and then to the state office, and then it's submitted nationally. There's never a guarantee of those funds, but there is a process, and there has been some funds in the past. Now, as of this morning, and something, let me back up. We've also been talking in the past about a committee at the state level looking at that particular chapter and recommending some changes to it. There was a committee meeting this morning. It's the Louisiana State Uniform Construction Code Council, and they met this morning, and they voted to delay implementation of tornado shelters, but only until January 1st of next year. So we have about an 8.5-month window. So just kind of give you an idea, I did a little research on some of our costs, and with the project cost at Houghton High School, for instance, for that wing project, adding the shelter adds about $1 million to the cost. The Parkway wing is a little bit smaller. It adds about $400,000 to the cost. And for comparison, you may or may not recall this, but about a year and a half, 2 years ago, just before we went out for bids on the new Benton High School, we were asked to do some estimating for a tornado shelter if we wanted to include it. It wasn't required then, but there was an option, and that was going to be $2.3 million. So it's a big chunk of change to meet that code. So just to kind of give you an idea, we have a little window. If something works out and we can move these projects forward, we can avoid some of those costs, all right?
Mr. Babineau, you have 4 projects, Benton Middle School, Cope Middle School, Houghton High School, and Parkway High School, and their dedicated numbers on a previous slide. Are these costs included in those, or were these going to be above and beyond that?
It all depends how soon we move forward with construction.
No.
Like I said,
Are these numbers currently in, the storm shelter number currently in the estimated cost from a previous slide?
let me give you an answer on that. When the budgets were set in 2016, so 3 years ago, the budgets were set, we've got a fairly healthy contingency. It would take those projects out several years, okay? The storm shelter cost impacts that contingency. So if we built the project starting in about a year, we can probably make it work, okay? Because of the inflation factor that adds if you keep pushing out every other subsequent year, all right? So to answer your question, as long as we build them soon, yes. If it goes out too far, we're going to have to do some tweaking on the projects to bring them into that budget, okay?
Thank you.
But I thought you ought to know what that real cost actually is.
Thank you. Mr. Bullard?
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I guess I'm just a little confused or a little slow here, but you're saying the funds dedicated for the improvements at Houghton can absorb an additional $1 million and still perform the projects currently authorized, and likewise, the projects at Parkway can absorb an additional $400,000.
If the project is built soon, okay? I have that much contingency.
Could you quantify soon, please?
Within a year, all right? Now, let me rephrase that in another way, or give it to you another way. If for some reason we're able to move these projects forward and able to sell bonds and move those projects forward and get to the point of selecting contractors, which means we have to complete design, we have to hire architects, complete plans, put them out to bid, and select a contractor. Those plans go into the permit office before the end of the year, then we don't have to pay for those storm shelter costs, all right? So it's a bit of a sticky wicket, but this just came out this morning, and I realize it might be catching you off guard, but this is fresh off the press information.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And the last item on this, I had a colleague sitting in the meeting, that's where I got the information from. He sent me a text after the meeting was over. And he said a representative of the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness stated there weren't currently no grant funds available. So he used the word grant funds. I assume he means FEMA funds. That just means in current year. Doesn't mean that won't happen or change in a subsequent year, but that's the most current information I have available at the moment.
We're using build a wall.
Ms. Smith?
Ms. Brotherton, you must be praying, because see if we can sell bonds and you can get your high school wing for the next year, then you'll have $1 million left over you can add it to your stadium.
I'm thinking
Or
turf.
instead of
I'm
sending it
thinking
for a
turf.
storm shelter.
Turf, you know that kind of thing, don't you? Do we have to wait? I'm going to ask this question. I know we're involved with the DOJ, and can we start these wings? Do we have to wait?
That's a question beyond my scope right now.
Mr. Norwood, can you get with Mr. Geis and ask him what our restrictions are? Is
Yes.
Will here?
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Will's
sorry.
here. I
I'm
didn't
sorry.
see Will.
Mr. Self, I didn't see you over there. You were hiding. Are you able to give us any insight into our current DOJ situation in regards to planning any of these
Swings.
projects?
Right, with regard to these projects, because these plans are not out, if they would add to the capacity of the schools, then we would be under the order where I believe it's the 30-day notice to the DOJ to have them object.
Okay.
So,
All right.
we'd have to get that in motion.
Okay, thank you.
Let's get it done.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
You said capacity. At Houghton, part of that wing size is to deal with replacing old antiquated classroom wings. So if you replace new with old on a one-for-one and tear the old down, that's not an increase in capacity. Is that affected by the DOJ order?
If you're removing T buildings, those aren't counted for the DOJ purposes in capacity. I need to probably read the order again just to make sure, but my understanding was that it's capacity that was the issue in the order.
So we really,
I think they're going to tear
Well,
down eight.
just so you, and we're going to get to a slide in a minute on that, but I'll just, we're talking about tearing down H.
Yeah.
I think that's 11 rooms. You've got at least 2, maybe 3 T buildings. Is it 2 or 3? Anyone from Houghton? It's 2 for sure. I think it may be 3. So 13 or 14. And then we're talking about taking down the lab building. That's 3 classrooms.
yeah,
So 14, 15, 16 rooms is a one-for-one replacement. The wing is designed for 30 standard and 2 sped rooms, so call it 32. So half the wing is dedicated just for replacement. And the other half for, future growth. So were we to be able to move forward with, maybe we could do it in phases. I'm not sure. I want to think about that, what the cost might be to that. But it struck me that maybe if we can, depending on what the DOJ says, you get the first 16 up, and at least you avoid some of these costs we're talking about.
yeah.
So, food for thought.
Yeah.
Mr. Norwood, can you and Mr. Babineau get with Mr. Self and Mr. Geis and kind of iron that out so we have some good understanding about that? Y'all get together. Thank you.
And just so you know, we've got 8.5 months in this window. That's probably enough time for us to get everything done that we need to do to get to that point to avoid those costs. But we need to get started completing design and moving forward ASAP. All right.
I agree.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions on that slide? All right, next slide, please, sir. A little update on Benton. Work is at 77%. The membrane roof is, I guess, it's probably about 99% as well. The metal roof on the competition gym is underway. The rain a few days ago kind of halted some of the progress, but it's in the dry, so they're getting work done. The brick and block on the outside are also about 99% complete. Most of the classroom interior finishes, lighting cabinets have been installed. I've got a picture on the next slide after that. The contractor expects overall completion by early July, but due to rain days he's been given over the course of the project, about 1.5 years, he contractually has until late August to finish. So if he somehow misses, he wouldn't be penalized. But we had a meeting last week with him. He gave us a new schedule, and it says July 9. And I said, I'm giving a report to the board. Are you going to meet this date? If you're not, tell me now. And he didn't say anything. So I'm going with July right now. And so all the plans right now are to move in. So with that, the classroom wings and the admin area will be finished ahead of that in time for teachers and the administration to move into the school and get things ready so that they can actually begin school in the fall. So the plan right now is this school will open in the fall. All right, bottom line. Any questions? Okay, a couple of quick photos. Oh, go back one. Thank you. This is the Carter photograph. Right now, this is the varnish block, the painted block, and they're putting an accent stripe with one of the school colors here. This photo is the student commons. This adjoins the media center and then the Carter to the cafeteria and gym. And the stair you see in the foreground, or the background there, is over to the B-wing west side. And I'm actually standing on the stair for the B-wing east side. Next slide, please. A couple more photos from the outside. This actually is the competition gym. This is the last part of the school to actually be built. The brickwork, you can't quite tell my lighting's not very good, but there's the masonry here, and they've got to finish this wall, and then the other side wall, which is the west wall. And then right at this juncture is the student entry to the building. This is the student parking lot right here in front. This is the lock areas, gym, and then that's the B-wing, actually B-wing west side of the school. Any questions? All right, next slide, please. A couple more photos of interiors. This is one of the chemistry labs. Most of the labs are just about done. You can see all the cabinets installed. The electrician is working to connect all the power. The flooring's in, lighting, ceilings, paint, the boards. They're getting really, really close to being ready for the classrooms. And that includes the classrooms in B-wing east, B-wing west, and A-wing. That's nearly all the classrooms in the entire school. So those actually should be finished probably by late May, but there'll be some final cleanup and fire marshal roofs and that sort of thing. So that's what we're saying in June. All right. And the photo here is of the media center. All right. Any questions on Benton High School?
Current budget status for this entire project. Give us a good overview.
The overall budget is $58 million. Okay. Right now, you're running about $380,000 under budget. Okay. The off-site work, which is the turn lanes at southbound Benton to Kingston, southbound Airline to Kingston, and a traffic signal at Kingston and Fairburn have all been let. They actually came in about $100,000 under budget. And so there's been some conversation between Mr. Norwood and the parish. The way that's going to come out, that's probably going to be the simplest way to do it, is instead of the school board putting those out for bid and paying it for PM fees and everything else, we're just going to write a check to the parish and let them go handle it. And it'll be a clean deal.
Now,
so overall,
are those savings where you calculate the $380,000?
That's all included in this right here. Actually, the savings will probably go up a little bit. I always put a little bit aside for just in case issues, but 380 is what we've got for sure right now, unless something big changes. But I have a little bit additional set aside for some offsite in case there's a problem. So I don't want to be coming back to you and saying, oops. So as the project completes, that number, unless something happens, should go up a little bit.
And,
so we're in good shape.
But that $58 million, that included some contingency up front, correct?
It did. There were contingencies in there. We actually used some of that to expand the gym, if you recall. That was an additive alternate of, I think we added, 480 or 500 seats to the gym. And then we expanded one of the parking lots as well at that point. And of course, then you pay for the land out of that same amount of money too. So that was an all-in number. That's furniture, that's computers, that's all the construction, that's all the fees, everything.
Where are we with change orders? How are they coming in?
Change orders are good. The total change order add is around between $60,000 and $70,000. As a percentage, that's way under 1%, which is well below industry standard. And it'd actually be in the negative, which would be to the good, if you will. But in one of the change orders, we looked at some things that were sort of a little overdone. And then in the process, we pulled some money out. We did some value engineering, if you will, at the very beginning. And in the process, in consultation with maintenance, we actually put a better floor in all the classrooms that won't have to have so much waxing. And that is going to save you money in the long run. So you got some improvements. So it's going well.
Mr. Roger, And I ask you this because of the situation down at Parkway with the baseball and softball concession. How often are you able to go out there and kind of walk through and kind of give your take on things out there as far as if things are being done quality-wise and things like that?
I'm out there with the construction meetings once a month at least, and then we travel out there when we have time every now and then, every couple of weeks. I have a man on site daily, writes me reports daily.
Okay.
Every afternoon, there's a report on my desk with the progress on what's going on in that area. They hit it real hard and made a lot of progress up front, but they did have some rain delays. I'm confident, we've obviously had these discussions, that we'll, as I told them, I'm coming in June regardless, so they'll be ready for me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions on Benton High?
Anybody?
Okay, next slide, please. Okay. A little update on Sun City. The building is fully framed. The building is actually in the dry. It's kind of hard to tell from the photo, but this is the roofing underlayment that was put on last week. The brickwork has started. The overall project is 40% complete, and the work is on schedule to be finished late June, early July. This is an interior of the corridor with some of the drywall for the fire separation going up. And then you can see the brickwork has just started. This is a picture from a week ago, so they just started laying brick when I was there last week. So it's running in pretty good shape as well.
Same question, budget status on this project as well with change orders.
It is under budget. Change order wise has been a small one, I believe, on to do with playground, relocating some playground equipment, but it's
Right.
under budget by $50,000, $60,000 right now. So I think the total change orders are $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. It's a
So
really
we're
small
about
amount. so far.
50,000 under budget on this one, is that what you said?
The overall budget, yes, we're about $50,000, $60,000 under budget right now.
How far, you say on schedule late June, early July, that's within our contracted
Yes.
timeframe?
The contractor's time was originally June. He's been given 35 days since the beginning of the project for rain. So it's technically July, and that's what he shows in his schedule. But we have a new superintendent on site, and I think he's doing a much better job in moving things along a little more aggressively. We've had a lot of conversations with him, and it's going fairly well. So far, pleased with the progress out there. Any other questions on Sun City?
I have one.
Ms. Brother?
I don't know if you can answer this question. Whatever happened with the trees? Whatever happened to that?
So you can't see it in the pictures, but SWEPCO provided a very large sail-type shade mounted
okay.
on 4 large metal poles, and it's over one of the playgrounds. If you look from Barksdale, you can pretty much see it. It's blue with yellow poles.
Okay.
So SWEPCO, however, had subcontractors do it, but SWEPCO themselves did step up and provide a shade structure to go over the playground to compensate for that.
Good. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other questions on Sun City? Okay, next slide, please. All right, Cope Middle School. This is for the secure lobby. The drawings are completed on that project. They've been reviewed. We've got a project budget of $70,500, and the work is planned for a summer construction project. Just to give you an idea, these are the existing doors to the front of the school. This is the existing administrative space where you simply walk in now, and there'll be see the blue lines. Those are the new storefront doors that will be put in so that you can't just walk in and make yourself at home. You got to come in here, then go into the office, check in, and then be buzzed out to go beyond the admin area. So that project is going to be coming up in just 2 or 3 months. All right. Any questions on COPE? Next slide, please. Okay. Bossier High Stadium improvements. The approved budget is $225,000. That's within the estimate. The drawings are about 75% complete, and the timing, of course, has to be coordinated with events so that we don't interrupt what's going on. Just a recap of what the project entails. Where you see this dashed yellow line on either side, That is a screen to cover the gap between the bottom of the stadium and the ground. We'll also do some regrading under the stadium where it actually slopes toward the field now. There'll be a visitor and home side handicap accessible restroom. There are none now. You've got to actually step up to any of the bathrooms there. There'll be some handicap parking, and then there'll be some handicap seating, this small area on each side of the stadium. There are existing ramps, and we've talked with the code folks, and those ramps, we're not changing the ramps so we can use the ramps without making any changes to them, but to accommodate wheelchairs, we're going to take one bench section out and then relay the slab, make a flat area so a person in a wheelchair can sit and then have a companion seat next to them. And then one part that's already been done is the new 4-amp electrical service on this end of the field. So those are the 6 items for that project. Any questions?
Mr. Cheatham?
Mr. Norwood, you might be able to answer this question. Where are we at on the drainage problems that we were having with the turf there at Bossier?
We had ARE, Sherwood Bailey, do a number of tests during several rain events in December, January, and into February. And one of the things that they did was to peel back the turf on the corners and open up the drain, the catch basins, and look at the drains to see if they were obstructed. They ran cameras up the lines to see if they were obstructed from the downstream side. And they also had a survey done on the field to see if it had the appropriate cross slope. And they did percolation tests on the membrane itself to see if the water went through at the proper drainage rate. So what was determined is that there didn't seem to be any obvious obstructions to the subsurface drainage. The crown is flat by an inch or two in the middle of the field, and that affects sheet flow, which affects overall drainage. And it also seems to be impacted by conditions where we have kind of a dry spell and the gravel bed underneath is very dry. It kind of creates, I'm calling it a vapor lock, that may not be the correct term, but it takes a while, it takes longer until it gets wet to drain more effectively. And so they observed that at least one occasion in December. That's what triggered these investigations. They watched it during other rain events. They measured the intensity and they measured the percolation and the time that it took for the water to drain. And we did not experience that with every rain event. And so what we want to do is to observe the conditions for a while longer and see how often this phenomenon occurs. And Mr. Bailey has recommended 2 potential corrections for it. The contractor would potentially be responsible for those. One of them would involve completely regrading the field, and we don't believe that would be prudent because it could possibly make things worse instead of better. The second thing would be to add some supplemental drainage. So that's another option we're looking at. So that's everything in general. Mr. Bailey is here if you have any technical questions that I'm not able to answer, but that's just kind of an overview of where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to have Bailey come up or not? Okay, we're good.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, Houghton High School. We met February 7th with the school administration and reviewed the plans for the proposed new 2-story wing. As I mentioned earlier, it's planned for 30 standard classrooms and then 2 sped rooms on the 2nd floor. Also planned are some renovations of the existing admin building right here, and then new additions for other administrative functions to consolidate them in one location right here. After a good conversation, the school let us know that they like the layout of the wing, but they would like to see some changes in the administrative space, which are, that was, pretty standard comment. So before we had a chance to do any revised design, I got a call, and I will show you the next slide and give you a little information. One of the concerns the principal had is in order to renovate, and this is a partial site plan of the school now. Okay, this is the library, to kind of give you an idea. This is the admin, this is H-wing, this is E-wing. One of the concerns with moving forward with a renovation of existing admin and then doing an addition is they have to vacate this space for a period of time, and he didn't know where he would move his staff for, say, a year or so. So he said, would you at least look at the idea of maybe putting instead a new admin wing on the, really the, I guess, the northwest corner of the wing, and then leave the existing admin as it is, but we'll use it for other functions. Perhaps we'll use it for testing, or we'll use it for ROTC or storage. They've got a lot of storage functions in H-wing, and when we tear H-wing down, that's got to move. So that building's about 3,500 square feet. So I said, okay. So the idea was, if you put something over here, what would the impact? And the real question is, what's the cost impact? Now, what we're talking about is roughly 3,500 feet, adding about 3,500 feet, so that's 7,000 total, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 7,700 square feet. Well, what's the cost if you simply build that 7,000, 7,200 square feet new? It's about a $500,000 upcharge in cost, okay? As I mentioned earlier, when the budgets were set, we included some fairly healthy contingencies in the project where I think we could absorb it, but if we do, it's one of those that, because of inflation, we've got to build that project or start construction in about a year, because we're going to lose a year's inflation on that project eats up that $500,000, okay? So were we to move forward with that, you would want to do it sooner than later, okay? Otherwise, we'll end up making some other sort of adjustments as might be necessary to this wing. Keep in mind, too, if things work out and we're able to move forward with the projects for all the various reasons everyone's aware of and get bonds sold in time, there's a potential, if we start soon, to get this project at least permitted or into the permitting office by the end of the year and avoid having to build those shelters, which adds, as I told you earlier, about $1 million to the cost. So it's one of the things that is doable, but there's a time limit when it's really doable without some other adjustments to the project, if that makes sense. Okay. So it's just a proposal. We haven't taken it very far. We haven't really done any redesign work. There's really no point in us spending time until we knew if the board would like us to move forward in that direction. So we're throwing the information out to you and see what you like.
Mr. Batmano, does this project for Halton High School include the demo of H-wing, of the H building?
There would be some demolition required. Well, the required demolition is the auditorium, which is right here. Okay.
But what about the H building in the horseshoe? Is that going to stay?
At some point, you would demolish it. You wouldn't be forced to. You might just close it up for a period of time. You might use it for storage for a period of time. Depends what the school's needs are. But eventually, the long-range plan is to take that building down and to take this building, which is the lab building, take that down as well. Okay, so the long-range plan is to remove those two buildings.
So right now, the plan is the administrative building and the wing, is that correct?
As far as new construction, yes, ma'am, that's correct. Two-story. And then demolition of the auditorium.
Okay.
And then you have a little bit of minor paving required in the front. Okay.
And how much would that cost?
Well, they're right at $16,083,000 remaining out of the total $16.5 million budget. And depending on when we start, we might be able to do more with that money. If we start later and we have to add the shelter, we're going to have to do some adjustments to the project, perhaps a little bit of tweaking here and there to fit it into the budget. So right now, that whole budget is for, as far as new construction, is admin space and 32 classrooms.
And that's 16 million?
Yes, ma'am. Now, keep in mind, when we set those budgets, we added inflation for a few years. So those are, if the project was under construction now, it would be well under that, okay? But we never know when they're going to get built, so we try to provide a decent cushion so that the projects stay in budget. We don't have to come back to you at some other point and say, hey, we need some more money. So we're always trying to do every project, and knock on wood, all the projects have come out within their budgets, and so that's always the goal.
Mr. Cheatham and Mr. Bamberg.
How far along in the process, you said something about the permitting, if we were in by the end of the year, do we have to have it bid out or anything? I mean, how far do we have to be?
You'd have to have bid the project, so you have to finish design work, or we've got to finish design work, hire the architect, complete plans, put it out to bid, select a contractor, and have him go for a permit.
Okay, so we would have to sell those bonds to have that money to do that before we could get to that process.
You'd have to have that money available, unless you've got another source of funds, or if let's say you had enough cushion in your general fund, and want to borrow from it for a short period of time, then go sell bonds later, as long as you've got cash, my understanding is you can do that. But you've got to have funding.
I'm going to interject real quick. Can you and Mr. Norwood get together
Mhm.
and give us a reverse timeline of estimates for, they have to go out to bid for 30 days. We have a meeting that we have committee approval, board approval. Can y'all work up some type of reverse timeline?
Sure.
That meets the January 1, 2020 deadline for these, and give us a reverse timeline and bring that to the next committee meeting so we will have some type of general idea
Sure.
of what hard deadlines we must meet, and then that way we can work with that as well.
Right.
Can y'all do that? I think
Sure.
that would be good for the committee and the board as well.
Could we amend that? They work it up, but get it to us before
Yes.
our committee meeting, so we have time, because from what I'm hearing, we're not gonna be able to dilly-dally with this. We're gonna have to move.
Yeah, we're going to have to make some
And-
decisions.
And so, rather than walking in here and it being presented, give us a few days to contemplate our next move.
We'll go
Thank
Mr. Bamberg and then you, Mr. Norwood.
Yeah, I was just going to make additional to that, we probably need to get with bond counsel to find out about the bond market right now and availability of that and what that looks like monetarily. But it seems like, to me, we would act on this to, one, not have to put in the stage 5 tornado
Yeah.
shelter, and the time value of our money coming in before the end of the year will be a huge benefit if the bond market will support it.
Sure, absolutely. Mr. Norwood.
I just wanted to mention the logistics of this briefly. We've had a lot of good comments, and they all apply. We need to get with our bond counsel and with our legal counsel on the consent decree. The first two action items that we're going to have to do is to find out how we need to report this for review to the Justice Department, as well as architect selection. Some of that can move forward it needs to move forward without you taking actual action on the items. That's the way that the consent order is written. And I think it's actually a 60-day review. We can start that as soon as we have a concept that you approve of without you funding it or anything else. What we're trying to do is to stay on point and to keep it moving forward. So we need a little bit of feedback on the plan itself. Are we going in the right direction, and can we take it to the next step so Clarence can continue his schematics and bridging? And then the second thing is to go ahead and start the architect selection process, understanding that this is schematic and the plan could be tweaked as we go forward. But that's the two main things. We'll get with council about how to request review by the Justice Department. Would be identifying existing capacities and capacities for growth and what our concepts are. We wouldn't have to have final plans to have that. And then finally, we understand that for the bonding council, we thought tentatively looking at summer for a bond sale, so that falls in the time frame. And what triggers the requirements is actually code review, not bidding. So that gives us a little window of about 30 days or more there that works in our favor. We went to that exercise with Sun City. We had to have the plan review and approval prior to the deadline, as opposed to actual bidding and bid award.
Okay.
So we have to have a motion to go forward.
I know. So at this time, we don't have to take any action as a committee. Y'all are going to get with
The
council.
first step for us is to run those rabbits with all the different issues with funding and reporting. And then secondly, to work up a little more on the program options to bring back to you on the cost and the budgets for those. I think we have the program, but the question is the format. Do we do an addition? Do we do a wing? For admin, that initiated with the conversation of how we're going to function during construction. And we didn't have an answer for that question on where they're going to put all those administrative functions while we demo that building and add on to it. So that's what started that conversation.
Okay.
Any other questions on Houghton? Okay. Next slide, please. I thought I'd bring you, this was an older slide on Parkway. Same issue. You've got a wing planned. We did a number of exercises to determine the best location for a new wing. What is in purple is the actual existing school now. The idea was to put a walkway, actually a two-story walkway connecting the existing to a wing. You'll see the wing is in two colors. That represents two phases of construction. The original budget was set up for 12 rooms, but while we're doing it, we thought we'd look at the option as the school grows, you may need to look at how you add classrooms in the future, because you've got a fairly tight campus, and the idea is to be as space efficient as possible. So the solution we came up with is to slightly modify the location of the bus loop, and then to put a wing on this end. The lighter blue would be a phase 1, and that's 2 stories. So it has classrooms, stairwells, elevator, and restrooms. And then a later phase, the dark blue would be to add these on, this would be the east side of the building facing the highway. So that's how you could accommodate a phase 1 and a phase 2 for a long-range plan. So just thought I'd give you a little quick update on that project. Any questions on Parkway? Yes, sir.
I have one more question on the admin wing.
Yes.
If we were doing an admin wing, does that have to have a tornado shelter?
Good question. The way we've approached it with the current plan, which was an addition, is that we just took the population of that building and assumed it would be in the shelter in the classroom wing. Now, if I understand your question, if you built an admin building by itself and didn't have the classroom wing, that's a question I've got to talk to the code folks about. It's not a classroom space, so I don't know how they would treat that. Of course, if it happens before, if you did multiple phases and it happened before, it wouldn't be a problem. But I'll ask that question. Okay. It's a good question. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, a little quick update on the concession building at Parkway High School. The work was substantially completed on February 4th. The contractor has started working on the punch list, and by contract, he has until April 20th to finish. The architect sent me a list today, and he's checked off about half the items. He's still got some more work to do, so he'll probably need that time, but it is in process. So I just thought I'd let you know on that. Any questions on the concession building? Okay. All right. Haught Middle School. This goes back to an item that came up about a year ago. This is the music air conditioning system. You may recall that we had a little bit of an issue with some a remediation need last summer. What we found out after a lot of meetings and the engineers doing some legwork and the architects and our firm and others and maintenance for that matter, was determined that there was a part called a humidity control sensor that was designed to go into the 2 units that serve the music area. The manufacturer shipped them, and for some reason they didn't get installed. Either they lost them, they don't know what, they've not been able to give us an answer. So the manufacturer found their paperwork, sent it to the engineer, he let us know. Then they sent another one after the problem became apparent. The contractor went and installed it, and so to our knowledge, everything is working fine now. In the process, though, of course, you incurred a bill of $32,722. The architect has been notified, the contractor, that they expect the contractor to reimburse the board for that. We've had a number of conversations about that item. If for some reason the contractor does not, we've got several courses of action we can take. The first would be to notify the contractor's bonding company. The bonding company is their insurance company that writes their construction bonds. And contractors live and die by the cost of their bonds. It makes them competitive or not competitive. And I'm told by people in that business that with a letter with the appropriate documentation, they may make a phone call and get this thing straightened out. It might only take that, which could be a nice result. Should that not happen, we can file a claim on the performance bond. We can also hold the contractor and the surety in default. If we hold them in default, or if the owner, technically the term is owner, holds them in default, they can be barred from doing business for a period of time with the board. Of course, there are always other actions should it get that far, but my gut tells me that a note to the surety company is going to probably resolve that. So that's the next action that we plan to take. So I just thought I'd give you that update.
Mr. Bullard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This $32,722, this is what we had previously referred to as $36,000. This was for the cleaning of band instruments.
Yes, sir, that's
and,
correct.
what have you. How long have we been negotiating to get this reimbursement?
We've presented it to the contractor in writing formally at least 4 times, and they have indicated the desire to sit down and negotiate. But we don't believe that it's something that's negotiable, and we're going forward with the action we need to do with the bonding company.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this occurred last summer,
Yes, sir.
was discovered at the beginning of this school year. And there have been ongoing conversations and meetings, negotiations, whatever we want to call it, since that time, involving yourself, Mr. Roger, and I don't know who else.
Our professionals
But-
of record have been actively involved in it.
And as a result, we still, all we're getting is lip service. What needs to be said or done to get this corrected?
We're working on that,
Do we
sir.
need to authorize any action or what? We're going to be, what, 7, 8 months into this thing now?
Where we are right now is we have 2 bonds. One is a maintenance bond, one is a performance bond. They serve different purposes. Originally, we thought this might be a maintenance bond issue, but it's actually a performance bond issue because it has to do with installation of the original equipment. And so we are as Mr. Babineau discussed, he's going to work with our legal counsel on serving proper notice to move forward with the claim.
Yeah, let's file it. If we have to file on both of them, I guarantee you they'll resolve it. They'll figure out which one
Yes, sir.
is, because they'll start pointing fingers, but could we please get this resolved?
Well, when we
And-
started, sir, we did not have all the information we have now. And we were also working to resolve the other issues with the classroom wing. There were 3 separate identifiable issues with different systems within the school. So as we worked through those, we continued to press with the manufacturer and the subcontractors to get to the bottom of it. And we did eventually get to the bottom of it through our consultants, and they provided us with a report probably about 2 months ago that really solidified our claim. And so we are pursuing that, yes, sir.
Let's get
and-
something going with some teeth in it. I agree with Mr. Bullard. I'm tired of listening to this. That money needs to be paid back, and let's move forward
We
with
need to
whatever
move-
course of
move
action
on
we need to.
Beyond this, this is ridiculous. And are we, is Mr. Roger still here, or? Mr. Roger, are we comfortable
That's what it states.
this situation has in fact been corrected, and we have an HVAC system that is functioning as it should, be it cold, be it hot, be it humid, be it dry?
We checked out on the band room. We were there when they added humidity stats and made the repairs to the system. We're comfortable that it is, but we're not going to be laxed about it. We will be observing it this summer because we don't want to have this happen again.
That brings me to another point, and I don't expect an answer, but how many man-hours has your department expended on this one thing? And we'll never see a nickel for that, I assume. But it has to be in the hundreds that you have had to devote to trying to get this situation rectified without, I don't see, and correct me, Mr. Babineau or Mr. Norwood, I don't see where that contractor has been cooperative. I don't see where they have put forth the kind of effort. We've had to put forth the effort just to make them do their job and what they contractually agreed to do. And I'm sorry, I guess, I'm not trying to create an issue, but doggone it, some of these contractors are just not, they don't seem to be responsive when we have issues come up, and there's a lot of money involved here.
Do we need to have motion or anything to move forward with
No,
doing something here? So
No,
you
sir.
guys are
We're
good
working
to
on
move
that now.
forward and y'all are, okay.
We briefed Mr. Downey on Monday, but we were already working on that.
Eric, can you say one?
Ms.
Thank
Brotherton.
you.
Yeah. Since these sensors have been installed, are they all working now? Are the units working?
We have not seen an issue with the van room since it's been repaired.
Mr. Warren is here. Is everything working?
I'll second what you said. Mr. Roje and his team have been on site very regularly to address the issue. We've been in winter time, so
So,
we've been running a lot of air lately. We'll find out once we get back into air conditioning mode. It's been a fun journey.
yeah, and, we've got to stay on top of it and make sure we get this fixed.
We always submit work orders, I'm sure.
Right.
That Mr. Roje's department can supply that if we're needed anytime we have issues with our air conditioning.
Thank you.
Mr. Newman?
Ms. Smith?
If we're going to pursue against the performance bond, isn't there documentation that can be done to also cover their time that they've been involved and your time that you've been involved on this, rectifying this issue?
That's a question I don't know the answer to, but we can certainly look into it.
I would say if you're going to file the claim, I would do more than just the actual,
Man hours.
I mean, if the contractor would have,
I think he's easily expended at least 500 or 600 hours based on feedback I've received. And these are high-dollar hours. These are skilled tradesmen.
Mr.
I'm not an
Norwood?
attorney, so I'm not going to advise you on legal matters, but that may take some other actions to get that kind of cost. I think the first order of business is to get that out-of-pocket cost reimbursed. I understand where you're coming from.
It's just, I keep, all the conversations we've had previously, it's, in my mind, I'm thinking, Mr. Roje is having to devote so much time and so many man-hours that could have been spent elsewhere at other sites. And it just, it dominated a lot of his attention there for a period of time through no fault of his own.
Mr. Norwood?
I just wanted to say that although it's very rare for us or anyone else to have to file a claim of this type, it's not unprecedented. I think that we'll be able to get some guidance on what we can include in that claim. We're already working with Hammonds and Sills on that.
Okay. Keep us posted on that, please.
Yes, sir.
The last slide I have actually goes back to the drainage item on Bossier Turf Field. We've already talked about it, but this was my summary. Don't know if you've seen that illustration on the bottom, but this is what the engineer came up with as far as the areas where the water drains slowly. You can see in the photograph here, that photograph is roughly of this area where it's holding water. And I believe Mr. Norwood did a good job of sort of giving you a summary. Water drains off a turf field, or an artificial turf field, two ways. One, some of it flows off the top, and some drains through and then out through drainage. And what really happened, as we discovered, is there's a gravel base, just like you have in a road, and it has to have a slope to it. And the slope was measured by a surveyor before the artificial turf went down, and it complied with the engineer's design. And for some reason, apparently, the sub went back and did some work. No one can figure out why. And he has just the slightest little invert by about an inch in those blue areas you see, the 6 blue areas you see on that drawing. And that appears to be the reason for the potting. So we've already talked about all the whys and wherefores, but this is just sort of an illustration, so that brings it all home and back to you. So just thought I'd give you that information.
Mr. Cheatham?
How long do we have before, to make a decision on whether we need to go back in and raise that crown?
We have 2 or 3 different milestones. The first one would be 1-year warranty. The second one would be the, depending on what we discover, the nature of it is probably going to be a performance bond issue, not a maintenance bond issue. And so I think that survives up to 5 years.
My concern, and I understand we want to review some more heavy rains to see what it does, but In my opinion, it's absolutely unacceptable that it's holding water like it is. And I don't want us to miss the opportunity to, whether it's a 1-year warranty or the 5-year warranty, to get this, I mean, I've seen it the day after the heavy rain and people playing on it, and I had pictures sent to me of standing water, and, you know, I believe eventually our parish will go to all of our fields having turf fields, and the last thing we want is the one, I mean, this field's being used by Centenary, field's being used by LSUS, FC Dallas, it's being used a lot for lacrosse, and I just don't want us to let it slip and not get this issue taken care of.
Mr. Downey?
So if I understand this correctly, when the term inverted, those are actually low spots?
Yes, sir. It's a low
Where
spot.
it's actually lower than the surrounding area on the field?
Creates a very shallow bowl. Yes, that's correct. And the engineer has provided a couple of ways to mitigate that. I think one thing we want to do is, while the contractor knows about it and he's actually handled a lot of the testing, I think we want to make sure we make a formal notice to them, just so it's all clear, black and white, very simple, plain, can't be misunderstood, that this is the issue and we're going to monitor it. We want to notify them just with a simple letter of the issue, and then copy them on the report. Now, they've gotten the report, but just put a copy of the report with a cover letter to them, that we're going to preserve rights on behalf of the school system.
So it's been noted that the current height is not up to specs, correct?
That's correct.
I mean, that's been documented.
That report,
So there's no
there's a survey actually
debate
documents it.
about whether or not it meets the specs or not.
Well, they actually went back and resurveyed it to find these little low spots. Yeah, so they've got actual documentation from a surveyor. Yes, sir, that's correct.
Mr. Cheatham?
Why don't we, what's the bad side to have going ahead and saying, hey, go ahead and fix this?
Just disruption with activities that are ongoing. We'd want to schedule it off-season in particular.
What's the time frame to do the repairs that are needed?
You mean how long would it take to
Right.
do them? I really don't know that. It depends on the scope. We can get some more information, though. I'd like to know things like how long of a window we need, what the cost would be for the different options, and what the pros and cons would be for each.
I see
Cost.
Mr. Bailey here.
Cost for us?
No, just,
We shouldn't have any cost.
it wouldn't be for us, no, sir.
Okay.
We don't care about that.
And I guess that's why I'm concerned of, okay, the 1-year warranty period, we'll be coming up on that, what, in August?
Actually,
Probably before then.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date, but that
But-
sounds about right. Yes, sir.
I mean, to me, it's, even though we want to still monitor it, we know there's lower areas and there's issues that need to be fixed. We should go ahead and move forward with it and try to find a time frame where maybe whether it's over the summer that it's not used as much. I know it's being used a ton right now, but I just think it's unacceptable that it's holding that kind of water, and whatever we need to do, whatever you need from the board to move forward, I would like for us to give you that.
Just for your information, I just spoke with Mr. Bailey. He thinks this is probably about a 3-week process. So that's about the window time we need to look for between seasons. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? This concludes my report. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Babineau. All right, agenda item number 4, sale of property, resolution action. I believe it's required that this item be added to the agenda by a unanimous vote of the committee. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we add this item to the agenda.
Okay. I have a motion by Ms. Brotherton,
Second.
second by Mr. Backhouse here. Please vote. Vote is unanimous to add the sale of property resolution action to the agenda. And Mr. Norwood, I will let you take over from here, sir.
Thank you, sir. What prompted this initially was we received another purchase agreement. This one is for the 2 acres that are in front of Halton Elementary School. We purchased 2.6 acres to widen the driveway, and we only needed a fraction of that. And so we had the property reappraised, and we received an offer this week to sell that for a little more than what we originally purchased it for. So I presented that to Mr. Downey because he's authorized as interim superintendent to sign the initial agreements. But in doing that, I thought it'd be a good time to give you an update on our land sales overall, and also to discuss the project of the big exterior renovation, because we were asked last year to report on potential options for funding that, and this was one of the options that we had identified as a potential source of funding. So first, I'd like to just show you the 3 properties I want to present to you tonight for the resolution, and then also, if you like, before you take action, to show you the overview of the whole inventory of surplus properties and where we are with the sales right now. Mr. Selfis?
Just, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know that as this is an action item, you'll also need to ask for public comment before you take any action.
Thank you, Mr. Self. Do we have any public comment for the sale of this 2.252 acres? Nope, there's no public comment.
Thank you. Now, you may remember in December, with regard to these 2 tracts at Ivan, I'd like to give you a little more information and get your direction of those. If you don't like where we're going with this, we can delete those and just move forward with the Halton tract. But these are 2 fairly isolated rural school sites. They have not had schools on them in recent memory, but we own the property. My idea was, since we've gotten the energy up to have a real estate agent and advertise properties, to go ahead and list these as well and see if maybe the adjacent owners were interested in them. When we got the appraisals back, one of the comps was high, and I felt like it threw off the value, the appraised value of these properties. That's one issue. These properties may not be buildable. I have sketches, but just to summarize, the tract 6 was originally 1 acre, and Highway 157 runs right through the middle of it with an 80-foot swath, which leaves 2 triangles that are a total of about 1/4 of an acre each on each side of the road. And all the land around is owned by the same family, and they're interested in buying it, but they're not interested in paying appraised value. Similarly, across the street, the other school site is, I mean, you can see one from the other. It appraised higher than what I thought was reasonable because we had one comp that was high. There's an electric line that runs through the middle of it with a 30-foot easement through there. There's another field road that runs through the other way. And so both of the adjacent owners are interested in making an offer. They've made offers. And the offers have now expired because I needed to go back. They were so low compared to the appraisal and reevaluate that. What I'd like to do is to discuss this with the appraiser and give him the information that I have on these parcels, because I was told that one of the for sale signs wasn't even in the right location, so that's a problem. Then if you approve, then what I'm trying to do is to get these 2 properties off our inventory and cover our costs. Okay, so one of them appraised for $8,000, one of them appraised for $3,000, and I do not believe they're worth that. So I have to find a way to document that we're still attempting to get fair market value as we go forward. So I do not have a firm offer on those yet, but we've been working on this for about 3 months, and I think that we could possibly sell these properties, or they could just sit there. And we would not be using them. The adjacent owner would have the use of the property, and they would just sit there. But we'd really like to get them off our inventory. So that's what's going on with those 2 Ivan parcels, and I'd like to get some direction from y'all on whether we should go forward with that and to cover our costs to dispose of the property, or whether we should just leave them like they are.
So we actually have an offer for the 2.52 acres in Halton?
We did, but it is now expired.
Oh.
Because it was so far below the appraised value, we couldn't accept it without some further action.
It says offer is 95% of the appraised value.
No, that's the Halton property.
That's what I said, the
That's what-
2.52
I
acres.
apologize. I thought you were addressing Ivan.
No,
Yes, we're recommending Halton.
Oh, okay.
that is a current valid offer.
That's 95% of the appraised value, and it's more than we paid for the property.
Excellent.
So,
Mr. Cheatham?
I just wanted to make a comment that I believe the Ivan properties, I think we obviously got to talk to that appraiser, but I think we get them sold and get rid of them and not just have them sitting there. They're kind of useless to us. Just my thought.
So
You wanna buy it?
Could I ask?
just, yes, Mr. Dean.
It's the, let me just show you on the map. That'll make some sense.
That area is starting to grow.
Grow weeds?
Okay, this is the intersection of 160 and 157, where they kind of merge. And it's got an obtuse angle there. And one property is this neat square here, but you'll notice that on the assessor's map, it's dislocated. It's actually closer to where the tree line is here.
It's the old voting booth here.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and trash dump. That's our property. Then the other one is right here, right? And you see here's one piece and here's one piece, and the road has taken most of it. And so this property is all owned by the Adair family. This is now owned by Jordan Timber. And they're both interested, but they're not interested in paying the appraised value.
Is there a church on it? An old church?
There was, and you can still see it right here, but the church has moved south. They're now on the other side of the highway, on 157 further south, actually off the page. That's the Amwell Church, and that was the name of the school site at one time possibly.
So at this time, you just need a motion for the sale of the 2.25 acres in Halton, and at the same time, a motion to work with the appraiser on track 6 and 8 in Ivan.
Well, we already have that authority through a previous motion, and I will take it if you pass the motion I've suggested in the resolution, that I'll be moving forward on all three. But if you want me to take the Ivan off, then we will only move forward with Halton. All three.
I recommend that we adopt the attached resolution for sale of 2.252 acres of South Elm Street, Halton, Ivan Track 6, Section 19, T21, NR11W, Adair, and Ivan Track 8, Section 24, T21 North, RW West, Guest Larkin, to the highest responsive offer for each, as listed for 30 days and presented by Alley Real Estate, and authorize the superintendent and president to sign related documents.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I have a motion by Ms. Smith.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bullard. Committee, please vote. Motion passes.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Brotherton has a question.
Mr. Norwood, is it appropriate for me to ask, this land that we just sold by Halton Elementary, is it's not going to be like a your joint or something, is it? I mean, do we know who bought it? It kind of worries me.
We only have their names. I do know that we already had an interest in someone that wanted to put a wrecking yard there, and they wanted our endorsement on changing the zoning, and we said we didn't think that was an appropriate use to a school. This appears to be someone that wants to build a house there, as a previous owner.
That's good, then. Thank you.
We would definitely consider that as a factor, and so I contacted Halton because they don't have an MPC
Not
per
yet.
se. It goes through the town council, and so we did make contact about that.
Okay, thank you. They won't get in trouble.
All right, Mr. Norwood, anything else?
Yes, I have overall summary, and I do not expect you to read this, but I want to tell you what it says in brief. This is a list of all the properties that you've declared surplus in the last 2 years.
Yeah, you do.
And the original total appraised value was $2.8 million. This includes the Bellevue land, which was a separate transaction, not a part of our real estate. This included the sale of the property around the substation on Viking Drive. So this is a net total of what we wanted to have some unencumbered funds. We've been asked twice to try to look for alternative sources of revenue. So what I did is I took the appraised value, and where the property's been sold, it's in green. Where a sale is actually pending, it's in yellow. We have 3 of those currently. And then I adjusted it by deducting the real estate agent's 5% commission. And so what we're netting right now is 2.5 million or better in cash that is currently unencumbered, unallocated. I wanted to bring that to your attention because we've been discussing BIC renovation, and the total price tag on that varies from 2.8 to 3.2 million. We've already had previously authorized expenditures totaling about $250,000 or a little more, and so the net cost going forward to do that project is almost the same as the value of these properties that we may be getting in the next year. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not going.
I just have a comment on that, and I know, and Mr. Downey and I have discussed, things and maybe different ideas on how to get BIC taken care of, and I know that's something we're gonna have to figure out. Maybe there's been some talk about maybe sealing it every 2 years. I think Stacy maybe and Mitch had some talk about that, and we can look into that. But I just wanna, for the new board members and for everybody, when I brought up the idea of selling some of these parcels of land and get these together and get them on it, my reasoning behind that was to find a way to fund turf fields for our schools, because we didn't want to use bond money. There were several board members, 6 board members that were didn't want us using bond money and different things. So just wanted to throw that out there, that before we start earmarking this money, and maybe we don't earmark it right now, that one of the reasons we did this was to try to find another way to fund those fields if we so chose to go back and do one of them a year or do all of them at once at some point. But I do realize BIC is something that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations around that. But I think we're looking at several ideas on ways to take care of things that are going on in the BIC.
Thank you, Jim. All right, any further comments? All right, well, that concludes the Building and Grounds Committee meeting. Can we set the next meeting for Tuesday, April the 2nd? Will that be enough time for y'all to get the information back to us in case there's something that we need to move on that Thursday, which would be the first meeting in April?
Ms. Schwartz is checking to see if we have any conflicts on that date right now. I can see what she's doing over her shoulder. Yes, we can come back to you with some specific recommendations on moving forward with the bond.
I know we've given you some directions and some action items, so Building and Grounds Committee meeting Tuesday, April the 2nd at 5 p.m., please.
Did you send that to us?
No, this is not on the, this is not on the regularly scheduled Building and Grounds that you got for the entire year.
Give me again.
This is an added, April 2nd, Tuesday, April 2nd at 5 p.m.
Okay, gotcha.
And we plan to have all the information back, or most of the information back that we requested from Mr. Self, Mr. Babineau, and Mr. Norwood.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know. I'll look, and if we don't.
Oh, I don't.
And it's 5 p.m., not 4:30. Yeah. If there's not.
And you're gonna tell me, and then I'm gonna tell you that whole field house.
You know it's on